and we are on air.
Hello, everyone. We've got two very special guests with us today, and then we got Daniel sipping his hot chocolate. We have Brianna with Me and INFP channel. She's a fellow YouTuber, and I've watched some of her awesome videos, and very well done. And then we have Jack.
Hey, guys.
Hello.
So we have Jack as well, and he's the founder of the World Socionics Society. So he's our socionist in tonight, so he's going to offer a different perspective as far as type goes. So I'm very happy to have both of them on here. But Brianna and INFP is the topic of our particular subject tonight. So I just want you guys to know that is what we're going to be focusing on the most. So we're going to kind of exchange a little bit of questions and get a little bit of her perspective of kind of living as an INFP and ultimately kind of how she experiences life, some of the things that she might have challenges with as well. So Daniel, would you like to kick this off first?
Sure, I would be glad to. So please tell us, Brianna, what is it like being an INFP? For the 17 viewers we have already, Jesus. Yeah.
Yeah, hopefully that's some Twitter friends. I tweeted it out, so some of them might be watching.
Nice.
Being an INFP is hard in today's world because I think it's kind of like the opposite of an INFP, because like our opposite is like the ESTJ, and that's sort of the kind of type that's like celebrated in the world. So far away as we can be from being an INFP is kind of rough in this world.
What kind of struggles do you face on a basic level with society?
Well, for one thing, like for jobs, I know like as an INFP, I want something that has like personal meaning, and like don't always have that. It's about like making money and stuff like that, and like, you know, going up the ladder, and like I'm not really into that. And I know like personally, people, I've said this before, people point out that like I'm quiet a lot and I don't talk because I'm an introvert. And I think society is more friendly towards extroverts. So that's one thing.
Yeah. Well, those are a lot of really cool points. I like to think sometimes, and like, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, accomplishment and going up the ladder and having a vision or finding meaning in your work, these are all different parts of life that I guess different types would genuinely kind of focus on. When you dabble in like all this typology stuff, you really get like an idea that there's a lot of different agendas per personality area. So I don't know if you, Damon or Jack, if you have anything to like add on to that, but I totally get it. I kind of grew up as an introvert, but then I kind of branched out at a certain age, and I got that vibe a lot, and I can understand how it would be really hard to find meaning, especially I don't know if you live in the United States, but especially out here, everything is like, it's very kind of basic. Like you need to get a job that just pays, and then like nothing else matters. But then you have other people who are like this like entrepreneur uprising where there's a whole bunch of artists and people who want to create who are actually finding that kind of silver lining, So, and that's part of like the INFP is like to really kind of bring out like whatever you really want to give to the world and kind of do it in a way where it helps you live kind of the life that you want to live, but also there's a lot of meaning to your work. So it's a lot to say about that. Oh, what stereotypes? Oh, take questions. Oh, we have a question. What stereotypes are the most accurate for you as an INFP?
Well, I would say like the quiet thing is one, like a stereotype that can be true.
Well, what's something you get a lot, or something that you're?
He's like love cats, and that's also true because I'm like crazy about animals and I like cats.
I think we need to be more specific. I think there's so many stereotypes we're causing her to draw from that particular thing. I'm just using that to store questions, but Daniel, you like cats too. So look how giddy he got. You see that?
I like cats.
He even had to put his cup of coffee down or his hot chocolate down to talk about cats. But this topic is not about cats. Daniel. Hold yourself. Hold yourself.
No, it's good. I love animals.
All right, so Jack, I'm gonna toss it over to you for a little bit. See if you have any questions related to her. So go ahead.
First of all, I have a couple of observations which I thought rather interesting. That Brianna, you brought up how the sort of struggle you experience is one with the sort of competitive sort of rat race of. I imagine are you American?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, okay. This the competitive rat race of growing up in the sort of more American sort of culture society. The whole foundation, as it were, of America's idea of the American dream, that you come to America, you work really hard on your own personal merit, and then you succeed through competing with other people in free markets. It's sort of this idea of personal achievement, independent work, not having anyone else control you. So the idea of different states breaking up, you can't control us, that sort of thing. So it's interesting to see how this sort of values, this sort of what I've called gamma values in socionics, is very much what's known as world rejecting. The idea that you seize control of your destiny and you push your reality towards the outcome that you want. And it seems as though for you take issue with specifically the competitive aspect of that, what we call extroverted sensation, or SE, I guess MBTI often calls it. And that would be essentially the most rejected spot for, I say, is an INFP or an EII in the socionic system. The difficulty they have come to terms with the idea of competing, pushing other people out of their place to take advantage of a situation, the idea of rising up or, through that sort of competitive atmosphere. So I thought it was a very interesting observation that you shared with us. Also, how you focus on the idea that it seemed sort of meaningless to you. But there's definitely this aspect of introverted intuition is creeping in there. Not necessarily as a valued function, but definitely as a strong function. But yeah, I guess questions that I would ask. I think what I like to ask an INFP, it would be how the sort of thought process they go through when they first meet a new person. So I'd ask you, what thought process do you experience when you meet a new person?
Do you mean like the process I go through, like when I first meet?
Yes, also your thoughts.
Well, I know I do take a lot in through my intuition when I first meet someone. And I'll also be gathering information through my SI. I kind of have like a store of information of like past people I've met that I'll be picking up on as I like talk to someone, and maybe like things they'll say or their attitude. I think the longer I talk to them, the more I like build up an image of what I think they are. And I do know like the longer I know a person, like the more accurate that image becomes, because like I'm constantly observing them and like bringing in new pieces of information to match with like, I guess, my storage of things that I know have happened before.
So yeah, that does definitely this idea of sort of assessing what you know of a person, their inner character, as it were, and then bringing up things that happened in the past, how that sort of leads through towards building up your overall image in the long run. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. One thing I often like to do with the use of MBTI lingo is to try and avoid the use of MBTI lingo when we describe ourselves. the more organic we can be about describing the thought process we go to, and the less we put it into a cognitive function, the more we can understand it in its rawest form. So one thing which I like to do is sort of like just, if it's possible, to try to use language without the use of a lingo, if possible. That way, anyone who's watching could understand and tap into it. I think it'll be a lot more rewarding for everyone watching.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Thank you very much for your answer.
Jack, thank you for the question. That was a powerful observation, and it's a really good thing for people who are struggling. Last week we did the ISFP discussion, and this is a good point to draw out for people who may be challenged with ISFP versus INFP, is that that point of least resistance, SE. And as you can see with what Brianna said, you know, she has this aspect of I don't understand, nor do I really like this aspect, which is that competitiveness. So as Jack positions it, he says it's very world accepting, compared to the NISE axis, which is very world, rejecting, kind of moving an agenda forward. So just to summarize his point there, that's exactly what's going on. So that really distinguishes Brianna as somebody who is indicating the standard of INFP in Socionics, which is actually the INFJ in Socionics. And I think, Jack, you prefer the 3-letter code instead of the 4, right? Is that correct? Yeah. So, but other than that, I mean, it's also the INFP, demonstrating the INFP. So you can see the consistency here. Jack and I also know that there are some inconsistencies with MBTI and Socionics as well. So I like that altering viewpoint to show the perspective. So you can see in different people, it's going to play a little bit of a different role. So that being said, Daniel, I'm going to toss it back to you before I go on another rant, and then I'm going to ask a series of questions on my own. So Daniel.
All right, I'm back. So something that I realized is that, you both are NPs in MBTI. So maybe, Jack, you could start off and give like a little disclaimer of what it's like, maybe the difference between INFPs and ENTPs according to MBTI, like as far as using the NP temperament.
Yeah, I mean, the main thing that ties together these MP types and MBTI is the sharing of extroverted intuition in what sociologists call the ego block. The main thing about these types is that they are open to multiple perspectives, and specifically the active encouragement of expanding the possibilities available to them. They want to not feel limited to the options available. Now, this appears in different ways depending on how it's blocked. So one of the main differences between the ENTP and INFP is that for the ENTP, it's extroverted intuition blocked with introverted logic or introverted thinking. So it's thought to be about possibilities through structures and systems. This idea of the rules can apply to all scenarios if you just come up with a perfect system that explains everything. So more of that what I call a clarity-seeking approach, the idea that extroverted intuition is a means of better understanding how things fit together through introverted logic, but with an awareness of context and awareness of nuance and alternatives to that possibility. When it comes to INFP, instead of a tool for more structural understanding, it's far more to do with interpersonal relationships, introverted ethics, or introverted feeling. So it becomes what I call good faith judgment. It is still the active attempt to assess a person's character. You could say it is a form of judgment of a person's character, but it's not for the purpose of dismissing, so much as giving the person a chance, seeing the inner potential of the person to be a good person, as it were, to be someone who they can grow close to and who they can explore every facet of them as a person. So in that way, I call it good faith judgment, different to say the harsh judgment of the more SFP types. So yeah, that's how I'd describe the main differences between NEFI types, NFPs, and NTPs. On top of that, you could say that there is an asymmetric relationship between the INFP and the ENTP. And this is because the ENTP's blind spot, the vulnerable function, as it were, of point of least resistance, that for them is introverted feeling. They're very blind to the idea of psychological distances, how close they feel with each person. It sometimes may ask an ENTP, do you like this person? Do you dislike this person? They'll avoid answering the question directly. They'll find some other thing of saying like, oh, there's every evidence to say they're a nice guy. People get along with them. They'll deviate from their personal attitude towards the person. Now, when it comes to an INFP, they are all about these personal attributes, these personal assessments of how they feel towards things, their personal attitudes, whether I like it or I dislike it, that sort of thing. So the INFP, when faced with the ENTP's complete blindness in introverted feeling, can be rather shocked or disconcerted that they don't even think about things in this way. That is so fundamental to how the INFP views things. So those are, I think, the main differences between INFP and ENTP.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Jack, for sharing that Socionics perspective. Now, I want to ask Brianna this question. It's kind of related to that. We kind of know ENTPs to play devil's advocate, being able to look at both sides and kind of argue from both positions in a sense. So what is it like for you, Brianna, to play devil's advocate with the position of inferior TE, and if you do play it at all, and if maybe it's in the sense of people? So is there a particular experience that you can maybe share with us, or kind of explain how that overall scenario would be for you?
You mean like in cases where I would play devil's advocate?
Correct.
I think it depends how closely related I am to the subject, because INFPs do have a set value system, and some things are like very important to us. So if it's something that has like a lot of personal meaning, I probably won't. But if it's something I don't have like a set opinion on, or I'm kind of indifferent about, I might just like play around with it. Or sometimes if my extroverted thinking comes out, it usually comes out like when I'm angry sometimes. So in that case, playing devil's advocate, I will just like say something like the opposite of what someone's saying just because I want to. So like just like messing with them, which I think like ENTPs do that sometimes just to like mess with people, or like trolling and stuff like that. But yeah, like if it's not something that's like really important to me, then I'd probably be more likely to do that.
Okay, thank you. And quick question in regards to that as well. What is it like when you actually meet other INFPs? Do you doubt that they're INFPs, or are you more like, you're INFP and I don't like you? What's the typical arrangement there? What issues do you have with other INFPs?
Well, I'm not sure if I've met another INFP in real life, but I have met several online. So sometimes I'll feel like a comrade connection where, we connect easy and we get along. And sometimes there might be like a little bit of like jealousy. Like if there's another INFP, I think especially if they're a 4, if I'm like, because I'm a 4 Enneagram, and if the other person seems like they're like really similar to me, it kind of weirds me out, because it's almost like we're like the same person or something. So sometimes I'll just like get some space from them, because I'm like, it's weird how sometimes we can have like almost like the same thoughts. So yeah.
Do you think there's the possibility of a little bit of mirroring going on there? I mean, obviously INFPs are kind of branded as this original, authentic, true. There is no other person than me, as in like anybody like me. So do you think there is a little bit of mirroring at all as a possibility there? As in, I meet somebody and I'm going to mimic to try to create a rapport. What is that experience on your perspective, and what do you think other people try to do with you?
Like mirroring, like, can you define that some more?
Yeah. So, for example, to put it in a more linguistic sense, like, you may sit a certain way, somebody else will mirror that physical behavior. That's a physical mirror, but sometimes there's the emotional mirror, like somebody will say something and then you go, I agree, even though you're being agreeable and you may not really fully agree, but you're trying to create a rapport. How is that with other people? Like you said, you might meet somebody that is exactly like you, but do you think that that person might be actually mirroring you to create a rapport? Instead of just saying, okay, you know, like, and that happens unconsciously. It's not like this person goes, I'm going to mirror this person per se, but maybe they're just mirroring you to try to create a relationship with you. Do you think that's possible, or is it just that they are very much like you?
I mean, it can be possible, like that other types, like not just INFPs, but other types will be like mirroring just to like get along and agree if we're talking about something. But I think other times, like even if we're not exactly talking to each other, if I like look back on like stuff they've written online, it will be like eerily close to something like I would have written. So in that instance, I think INFPs can be a lot alike, and we can also be very different sometimes. It just, I think, just depends on individuals.
Okay. All right, Jack, do you have anything, or Daniel, you have anything so far?
Well, it's interesting that the way Brianne just answered that question, it definitely seemed to avoid the sort of clarity drawing conclusion. She said she said that she thinks that some INFPs are very similar, some are very different. It all depends on individuals. That's already bring it back down to the integrity seeking, the idea that things are more messy than just the structures we may create to try and understand everything.
Yeah,
So I think already. Yeah, exactly. Those values are showing through again. Now, it's interesting. What position of INFPs are mirroring. One thing I've noticed is that usually it's the FE types that come to do mirroring. The idea that they're especially with INFJs, a sort of very subtle way they end up mimicking the person they're talking to ingratiate themselves with them. For INFPs, it's not really their focus. It's not really the focus for them about how they're performing their emotions to the other person. It's far more about whether they feel comfortable with that person, if they feel the right attitude towards them, and how they're going to close that distance with them if they are not an object of desire to them. So I'd say more of the approach. The mirroring's not so much is not so much a thing for INFP. If anything, it's their ignoring function. They would actually ignore often the more performance-based emotion, and may even present emotions that are maybe more inappropriate in terms of how it's performed, because it's how what their attitude actually is towards the person. It can often be very sort of personal language. In the case for me, when I'm in conversation with some INFPs, they can get very personal in their discussions with me because they feel rather close to me, and it's often not the case that it's very photogenic. Words not very photogenic emotions. So yes, it's and this sort of mirroring thing is not something they tend to do.
So it's kind of like, would you say that it's more like a rehearsed versus, say, raw?
I wouldn't say that INFPs are prone towards rehearsing their emotional expressions either. I think that rehearsing.
I'm talking about extroverted feeling in the aspect of you.
Oh,
more
right.
More presentable.
Okay. Even then, the rehearsing aspect, that requires the idea that you have to prepare things out because you're not confident enough to act on your performance naturally and organically. For instance, take a look at it. I love as I go into politics, but if you take a look at, say, the Hillary Clinton example, she's someone who is very clearly rehearsing her emotional performances, and everyone can see through that. That would be an example of valued but weak extroverted feeling. I wouldn't say you see that sort of thing with an INFP at all, but or with an ENFJ, so the opposite, where FE is natural to them. Their charisma should be oozing from them, usually. I mean, okay, they could rehearse in the idea that in the immediate social scenario where there are all these physical events happening around them and they want to appear more dominant and in control, they may rehearse how you keep control of a situation so that the charismatic message can come through. So there could be some preparation in that sense. But in general, I'd say that knowing what emotion to give off is not something that the ENFJ will need to will feel enough doubt in to spend too much time preparing. I think it comes rather naturally to them.
So let's ask Brianna real quick. Brianna, what is your experience with people who lead with extroverted feeling or have auxiliary extroverted feeling?
I have had some experience. I was close friends with an INFJ, and my mom is actually an ESFJ. So, and actually my grandmother is also ISFJ, so I do have some experience with extroverted feeling. And I think sometimes it can be warm and giving, and I think it can be a good function for people. But as an INFP, it's kind of like goes against my FI, so it doesn't really feel natural like for me. So I think there's a tendency for like misunderstandings and like clashes between high introverted feelers and high extroverted feelers, because we kind of we're coming from different places. So sometimes it can be hard for us to understand each other.
Jack, is that pretty consistent with what you know in Socionics?
Yeah, pretty much. What's interesting is that it contradicts the idea that you should take the inverse of your leading function as your a good match. I've seen some MBTI places like Personality Page advocating ENFJ and INFP going together. But yes, what Brandon's saying would contradict that quite directly. In Socionics, definitely, that's an ENFJ and INFP going together would be seen as an extinguishment relation. It's meant to be rather unsatisfying, to say the least. The FE comes into a clash with equally rigid FI of the INFP, and there's very little understanding between them. In fact, each type may see the other to be sort of undermining what they're trying to do, because they just don't come from the same place in terms of how ethics should be used.
Okay, so with that being said, this is a little bit of a topic change. So please forgive me, but I want to ask because I think it's going to be a question that some of our audience is going to ask. If I understand this correctly, the ideal match for the INFP in Socionics is the ESTJ. So
yeah, but this is going to be an interesting one.
Yeah, you know where I'm going with this, but I'm going to ask it so that way they know.
Yeah.
So the question is, I want to talk a little bit about what your definition of ESTJ is versus what, say, Brianna has mentioned, which is this goal-oriented SE agenda. Since they're going to be more world-accepting, please tell me more about that, since they use the SI-NE axis. So tell me about that, and let's let our audience know what you see the ESTJ as versus what it's been branded as by MBTI.
Well, actually, the way I first had to start with what Brian said exactly about this sort of ESTJ character of the America she's grown up in. Now, in Socionics, we often try to actually type countries in terms of what the overall values are from a very broad brush perspective. Nothing set in stone, just sort of general picture of what the culture tends to be. And in the case of American culture, it seems to be very much about personal achievement, about a sense of competitiveness, a sense of entrepreneurialism. It very much fits in the idea of the LIE in Socionics, or ENTJ. Now, the ENTJ in Socionics has what's known as a mobilizing function, a conceit, an aspiration, and that would be this extroverted sensation, this need to be tough and in control of one's own lifestyle and let no one else be the boss of them. And that sort of tough, competitive nature, well, that's how I can often see coming out in what may be perceived to be an ESTJ in the MBTI system, this sort of extra tough entrepreneurial figure. And you can see examples of these sorts of ENTJ characters. I think of someone like a Dick Cheney sort of character. But there is this idea in Socionics that is very different for the ESTJ. The ESTJ, unlike the ENTJ, as you said, has world-accepting values, valuing SI and NE. In Socionics, SI, rather than being so much about tradition, is more about the flow in the moment, things physically working harmoniously. In a way, it's the opposite of how Socionics sees SE, which is about conflict and the battle of wills and competition. So SI is not so much about competition, it's about that sort of flow and harmony. At the same time, it blocks with TE. And interestingly, whereas MBTI seems to lay down TE as sort of external organizing, imposing rules onto reality, Socionics takes the opposite approach, whereby TE is actually a very adaptive function, focused on observing empirical evidence and learning from it and improving oneself based on what one has learned. So the question of TE plus SI creates this effect of what's known as self-sufficiency, being able to handle things oneself without any interruption or dependence on other people. This idea of being able to do a good job, doing work to good quality. So in a way, I mentioned this earlier today, that whereas sort of if everyone's watched American Dad, I think the main guy, I can't remember his name. Is it Stan?
Peter,
I can't
I think.
remember. Can't remember. Oh no! Oh, Peter's in a Family Guy, I think. I mean, just
Yeah,
work
that's
out
right.
which one
That's
is
Family Guy.
American Dad. Yeah, Family Guy. So Stan's a very stupid ENTP, but when it comes to the main guy, hang on, what does it say? What does it say his name is? Okay, so the guy with the big chin and the suit. I'll come with his name later. But yeah, he's. I imagine maybe an MBTI will see him as some sort of ESTJ, some sort of brash, rather rude traditionalist who's rather set in his ways. Typical sort of guardian view which Kiersey brought. Whereas I say that the perfect sort of fictional or the idealized fictional representative of the ESTJ in Socionics would be something more like Captain America. Someone who's actually very much focused on their self-improvement, doing things as well as they can. They still have a sort of SC and TE. They're very good tacticians, knowing immediately in the moment how to problem solve, best at working sort of with the hands and immediate observation, tinkering with different objects to find out how it best works through direct observation, and very little time spent thinking about what may or may not happen in the long run. Less time attaching themselves to more mystical beliefs or expectations that aren't directly supported by evidence they themselves have seen directly. And that sort of character who sort of likes the idea of being able to help things around him, improve their environment, doing a good job, that actually appeals rather a lot to, I say, the values of the INFP are, which is very much focused on their own personal potential. In a way, what ties these two characters together, the INFP and the ESTJ, is this idea of, first of all, being a virtuous, good person, and this idea of wanting to self-improve, to actually be able to handle things oneself and just improve as a person, live up to one's personal potential. In this way, I say the ESTJ and INFP go very well together, but I can see exactly why. If ESTJ is characterized like the sort of American Dad fellow, who I say is more likely a beta extrovert, SC and TI being used, I can see why it would be far more of a clash. I think that's the issue. When you look at things in terms of these... Oh, yeah, go on.
So, Jack, just to interrupt you, when you see the traditional MBTI ESTJ, in your Socionics world, what are they typed as typically? What would they be typed as in Socionics?
I'd say possibly more likely to be some sort of artisan, maybe an ESTP, maybe even an ISTP. Or I've seen another example. I've seen even ENFPs, ENTPs. Benjamin Franklin is someone who's often typed as an ENTP. If you like to look at what he says, it's all about helpful, practical advice to use in your life. It's not so much about clarity, so much as that sort of practical integrity. He'd be an ESTJ in the Socionic system.
So there's a lot of different variations, of course, depending on the individual.
Yes.
There's no absolute there. So, Brianna, how does that description of ESTJ vibe with you?
I think that sounds pretty accurate. And like, I don't have anything against ESTJs. I actually, I know two of them online and we get along pretty well. And the one is actually, has been a friend of mine for a few years, and he's always been very like encouraging and supportive of me, which is interesting because, you know, you do have like the stereotype of an ESTJ, but there are, once you come down to individuals, they can be like different from the image that a lot of people have. But I just think like the world does like value what the ESTJ can bring to the world more. So I think like they might have an easier time in society because like their talents are what valued more than INFPs are typically.
And the one thing I want to make sure I clarify is, Brianna, we are mix mashing a little bit of theories here.
Yeah.
So when we say ESTJ, I actually meant what is Jack's definition of ESTJ? How does that vibe with you? Because the people that you may have been typed as ESTJ and MBTI, what Jack is saying is they're probably not ESTJ in Socionics. Okay, so they might be MBTI ESTJs, but I'm just purely on the description of what Jack just said. How does that vibe with you in the sense of, because one thing you mentioned is you don't understand this pursuit of goals, money, material, changing, moving forward. You don't necessarily appreciate that approach. He defined ESTJ more of a self-reflective, I want to improve myself, make sure that I can maximize my utility in myself, within myself, and become the best person I can be. So hang on, Daniel. So that being said, we want to make sure that I want to see your opinion on that aspect and approach, because one thing that's one thing that stands out to me is, it's hard for me to not. The first thing one comes in my mind is like, what do people really want to accomplish, right? What do you want to do in life? And when someone says, I don't know, I'm like, the back mind thought is like, are you just kind of like floating through life? What is that? Right. So I have to, as I've moved through, typology, and I've learned to kind of let that go and respect different viewpoints. But originally that's what it's always been like, what is that? But now we're hearing this definition of ESTJ, which is used in MBTI. ENTJ and ESTJ are very similar. There's just a little bit of difference. One has sensing, one has intuition. There's a little bit of difference. One has long range vision, one has immediate logistics. Okay, great. But the way he's defining ESTJ is totally different than the one that is in MBTI. So I was wondering if that sounds more like something you'd want to accept in your life more than, say, ENTJs like myself, who are always forward agenda moving. So I was wondering your perspective on that. And there's a lot, like I said, it's a lot of mix mashing. So whatever you can come out with, I'm okay with.
Well, I do think I would value someone who is looking on the inside and trying to grow into the person they want to be. And I think that's kind of what Jack was saying, how they want to improve and they have goals, but they're more internally than the MBTI ESTJ. So yeah, I would find that interesting.
Okay. Daniel, you had a question?
I was gonna say we have this guy who's really great. His name's Blake. He is he works with us, and he's an ESTJ according to MBTI, and I actually really appreciate the fact that even though he is, me and him are both type 3s, but I think he's a little bit more. I think he's a pretty overall balanced character. He's really into personal growth, and he's actually very sincere and caring for others. And I think that's because he resonates with his direction in life. He's moving forward as far as his personal growth, and he's able to reflect and kind of really build up his friendships and relationships and connections. Whereas I think maybe INFPs just really, regardless, do this on an intimate level all the time. So, you see a lot of times, I think extroverts, they really put themselves out into the world and really put on, not necessarily a show in that direct context, but, they have kind of agendas in a sense. Whereas introverts really kind of perceive in the beginning, and then they kind of get out there, So if you had to flip the roles, you'd probably not really have a comfortable time doing a lot of things maybe, any kind of extrovert would be doing, whether it's networking maybe, or just meeting a whole bunch of new people and really kind of having to sell yourself, which is a skill in life, right? So there's a lot of different characteristics I think ESTJs bring to the table. I wish he was here though, but I don't know where he is, so. But yeah, Blake's a pretty cool guy when you get to know him. He's not very I've met a lot of ESTJs that are on the just the whole spectrum, and I guess it really depends on your overall values.
So what I'm trying to get at is I'm trying to get to the concept of ultimately the pairing of what Brianna said in the beginning, which was I don't like this agenda moving thing. The point I was trying to get across is if we pair that with the traditional MBTI sense of what an ESTJ is, that's going to repulse her natural preference, right? Which is, I don't like that. And think about the way that we picture it is this kind of SE conflicting, agenda moving, I'm gonna put some force on you type of thing. And as we know in Socionics, that's the point of least resistance. The INFP is blind to that. They don't like that aspect. So That being said, they would naturally repel each other. But in the socionic sense, the Socionics ESTJ, which is obviously a totally different definition, creates more, I think, of a more of a balance in that type of relationship. Because looking at the old school ENTJ, or not, I'm sorry, ESTJ from MBTI, that's like exactly what she said that she didn't like, right? So that's what I'm trying to draw that parallel and go, okay, here's what we're seeing and kind of the relationship dynamic. Because when I looked at Socionics originally, and I'm sure a lot of people feel the same way, I thought the relations was a bunch of crap. Because I had the MBTI understanding of these different things. So if you take an MBTI knowledge and you try to move it over to Socionics and say the ESTJ this way, and I was like, that's what a crock is that?
Yeah, it's
you know?
confusing. Like,
yeah, I was like, I mean, seriously, it was like, okay, this is ridiculous. How people aren't mathematical equations, right? Yeah. So I was like, there's so much more to humanity than just looking at a chart saying, okay, I'm going to eliminate everyone other than my dual. Forget everybody but my duals. That's ridiculous. And I was completely repelled to it. But I think there's a lot more meaning than what we see on these little blurbs online or whatever. And I think that's what I'm trying to get at here. So, one thing I always like to dive into is the relationship aspect, because it kind of shows the friendships. And I think we talked about in one live show, I don't know if it was recently or actually it was on Ben's channel. One live show that I did, it was mentioning the type of friends I have. Both Dr. Dario Nardi and I have NFP friends. That's like the majority of our friends are NFPs. And he's obviously INTJ and I'm ENTJ. And we noticed that almost all of our friends are NFPs. We did kind of like just chatted about it a little bit. And we said, yeah, that's strange because all my friends are NFPs too. So the first thing I would like to ask Brianna is, do you have any NTJ friends? And if you don't, why not? Because we're awesome. And number two is, actually, no, on all seriousness though, what type of friends do you find yourself surrounded by? What type of people what types generally do you find yourself surrounded by?
well, first of all, I think most of my experiences with MBI types have been like online, because I'm like part of a community online. So we talk about MBTI together. In real life, I do know a couple of friends and what their types are, but I don't think I know any NTJs in real life. But online, I do know 3, and 2 ENTJs like recently adopted me online. So I'm like under their care now, I guess. And I like talking to them. I think I actually like wasn't at all interested in NTJs until like a couple months ago, but now I find them like interesting, and I guess I'm still trying to like get inside their mind and like, figure out how they work and stuff. But I do have ENTJ friends, and I have a couple INTJs as friends as well.
Jack, this is a counter question to that. I'm interested in hearing your position on this. Do you think it's more likely because the INTJ has weaker SE naturally that they would probably get along better with the INFP versus the ENTJ? Or what is your perspective on that?
Well, it's the case with ENTJs and INFPs is that they're what's known as semi-duality. Semi-duality is actually a rather good relationship. The extroverted logic of the LIE does fulfill the main need of the INFP, whose introverted feeling fulfills the main need of the ENTJ. So I would say actually is a good relationship, possibly even better than the INTJ and INFP. As long as the ENTJ does not over-push with extroverted sensation, I think, and the INFP is not too soft for the ENTJ's tastes, because the ENTJ does really want a more harsh, more decisive use of introverted feeling, sort of, no, don't go that person, he's a scumbag, that sort of feeling, that sort of harsh, immediate judgment. The ENTJ can't really get that from INFP. But they do get the sense of a feeling of connection, a feeling of someone accepting them for who they are, which is what TE types really need. It allows them to turn off any role use of extroverted feeling, having to put on a big happy face because people around them expect them to. They can't stand that sort of thing. So being accepted for who they are and having a sort of close relationship with someone, that really does fulfill the needs for both parties. It's just a question of other things. The world rejecting, world accepting clash still is there. So yeah, I still say ENTJ and INFP is probably preferable to INTJ and INFP.
Though I have, I think one consideration would be the place of the introverted feeling, because I did, I think INTJs, you know, they have territory introverted feeling, which they may have more of a use of it. And I've heard people say that INTJs are kind of like, they can be the feeliest of the thinker types, because their FI comes out sometimes. And for ENTJs, they have like very little access to that. And though as they like develop more, they can use it more, but I think that would be a consideration to how strong their FI function is with, if they were getting into a relationship with an INFP.
Okay, so Jack,
yeah,
I think that I would like you to comment on that from the aspect of, you know, the INTJ's point of extroverted feeling and how that's actually happening in the INTJ, and maybe this is why the INTJ relationship is not seen as effective as the ENTJ relationship with the INFP. Just to kind of draw the correlation of where sometimes people don't understand the aspect of, like for example, I have a difficult time expressing emotion, but I can do it in short bursts. And so that's where for me, it's like I can put it out there, but it shuts down pretty quick. I get pretty worn out. I put on the mask if I need to, in a sense. And so I don't know if INTJs, the ones that I've exposed myself to, don't generally do this. And so so go ahead if you would explain that.
Well, in terms of expression of emotion, INTJs are far less able or willing to acclimatize to social expectation of people expressing themselves in an emotional way that's for the sake of performance. The INTJ in general rejects that entire aspect of life. They're more likely to say whatever they think, even if it may be very bad for the mood around them, and they won't particularly notice. Very much directed by their personal attitudes towards things. They are, in a way, as Brian says, they are very feely for a thinking type, in as far as introverted feeling goes, and in as far as introverted feeling goes in a sort of harsh, blocked with extrovert sensation way, the harsh judgment. INTJ is a sort of person who, if they get into a close relationship with someone, they can be in a great point of vulnerability, because if there's some sort of betrayal, they can then basically shut off all doors and not really venture outside for the more social experience for a while. It can be very difficult for them to get past that. ENTJs, it's they're more able to acclimatize to extroverted feeling needs, being having to express themselves to a degree. You can see people like Elon Musk and Bill Gates. They can make themselves be polite. They understand the sort of social norms and conventions in terms of how to express themselves in that regard, but they still need that. Their need is for someone to accept them for who they are, so they can sort of let go and roll back that sort of performance aspect. They just want to be able to say what they think whenever they think, similar to the INTJ. Now, I think one aspect of introverted feeling for INTJs and how it may relate to an INFP is that the INTJ, having as a mobilizing function their conceits, the thing which they want to sort of handle themselves, is that they'll be rather drawn towards forming their own relationships with people and deciding how they feel towards the person. With an ENTJ, they're the ones actually looking for someone else's guidance in that area. They're more happy to say, right, I don't think I like this person very much, but I'm not very sure, and then they'll feel bolstered and more a greater feeling of certainty when someone else who they're friends with says, yes, no, that person is not nice. I think we can stay away from that person. And so they may feel more comfortable accepting those sorts of judgments, as it is a more flexible function use. Whereas for an INTJ, they actually want the other person to be more flexible and actually to support them in their use of introverted feeling, to make it look as if they're the ones who are using it dominantly. this is the thing about the mobilizing function as a conceit. It wants the other person's stronger, more competent use to almost appear to be like the grey cardinal, the sort of power behind the person putting up the front of being the dominant one. And then that sort of relationship is something which INFPs don't really gel naturally with, but you can see it more easy with an E something FP, with an introverted feeling auxiliary type, who's more flexible in their use of introverted feeling.
Well, thank you, Jack. I appreciate that. So yeah, it's interesting to see these particular perspectives. So I thought that was to look at the dynamic between these NTJs and NFPs, and kind of why I don't have a lot of ENFP friends, but I have a lot of INFP friends. And so NFP, when I said NFP, I really meant INFP. I have a few ENFP friends, but mainly INFPs. It's like I could probably name on both hands a fraction of the number of INFPs that I associate with. So people who claim INFP, I really haven't psychoanalyzed them to the point of killing them. But the idea is that I associate with that type. And I don't know, and I'm not saying that's the perfect relationship in the sense of romantic relationship, but I do know that I have a lot of friends that are that aspect. So I'm trying to understand if the Socionics relation, is that specifically in the sense of friendship, or is it specifically in the sense of romantic? And then I'm gonna turn the table after this. So go ahead.
I mean, I can think of examples of or semi-duals in this area getting together romantically, yes. I think I've known ENTJs who have dated and had relationships with INFPs. I also know the opposite. Actually, a good example of an opposite example, like an ESTJ and an ISFP, would probably be Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner, is what I'm looking at more recently. But yeah, I say it's actually a rather common relationship to come about, especially if you think about how you may find it more easy to encounter another intuitor if you're an ENTJ in a more sort of academic sphere, perhaps. And in that regard, you may find that the ENTJ may meet more INFPs and more likely to connect with them. So, yeah, I say it is a common romantic relationship as well.
Okay, thanks. Daniel, do you have something to add to that real quick?
I do not.
Okay. Jack, did you want to go ahead and add anything? Brianna, add anything?
Well, I think one thing is interesting is that INFPs and ESTJs frequently like pair together in marriage, and from the studies I've read, they aren't sure if it's because there aren't as many ENTJs in the world. They're not as common. So I know INFPs and ESTJs may like attract each other because they have what the other one lacks. Though I don't know if their marriages always end up like happy because, the same thing that attracted them might, go the opposite way.
Yeah.
But that could be an interesting point that if there were more ENTJs in the world, maybe INFPs would like choose them more often than ESTJs.
And so I think I would like to add to that. That's something that I think is really a pretty strong point. The one thing I would say is that there's many factors why relationships fall apart. Obviously, you know this, but I want to make sure that I throw it out there that it's obviously not type is the foundation of every relationship. So I don't know if a lot of the ESTJs that are in these particular things are the Socionics ESTJ. They could be.
Yes, so that's about to say.
That's what I think Jack. I saw him jumping out of his chair, like, oh, and I wanted to throw that in there because, yeah. So, yeah. But I will say that according to MBTI, the ESTJs, or people who typed as ESTJs, are pretty abundant. There's like 12%, 14%, something like that in society. It's probably a lot less in Socionics if we were to take a Socionics statistic. Jack, do you happen to know the statistics of ESTJ and Socionics?
No, it's assumed or believed that it's around even in terms of the different numbers. I mean, okay, this idea that a lot of people are, say, ESTJs, it doesn't seem to account for different population differences. It could be just in that area that there are more people who are more down to earth, more grounded in the day-to-day, more, I guess in the MBTI definition, more traditionalist. you could say, is what could give you more of an SJ sort of type. I mean, depending which department you walk into in a university, you'll find very different collections of different sort of types. I found plenty of NTPs when I went into a philosophy area. Found plenty of extroverted feeling used in the Musical Theatre Society. I mean, I don't know how this census was conducted. I don't know how rigorous it was, whether it used people from different cultures around the world. So I wouldn't be able to comment on it with any sort of knowledge.
Okay. I also want to add this fact too, that I've always been romantically attracted to INFPs, INFJs, but both have gone to hell. So that is a point I want to add in here, that I think there is probably, I got to look into the socionics relations more to find out why. It's probably my fault in some way, shape, or form. I'll accept that. But I think one thing that you mentioned that's a little different with me is that I don't really want the assertion of this is the way you feel. That, you know, I don't really want someone telling me who is good and who is bad. I trust my own evaluation.
Yeah.
But I use observation. I use what I can see. This is what it is. I mean, I don't really, I use what patterns I see. I trust those patterns. So I don't really want somebody to tell me if someone's good or bad or not, unless they can provide a reasonable, objective rationale.
Yes. And what I mean by that is not so much the question of whether someone is it may have a factual judgment. I mean in terms of whether your personal feeling towards them, your attitude towards them, is one which, when you try and draw it, although there is a need for ENTJs to be independent on the factual evidence they're assessing and how they build up their opinions, they may necessarily lack the sense of confidence in drawing that judgment upon someone's character as a subjective judgment of who someone is, as opposed to what things are happening, how things are going, what the facts of the matter are. So it's a question of boosting confidence rather than just having this person be the expert and therefore just follow whatever they say blindly. That is actually the anathema towards how a Gamma views things.
Yeah, I would agree with
It's more
that.
that they know this person to be trustworthy in this particular position, and they know over time that they have their confidence boosted from that person giving that particularly a subjective judgment, which they themselves don't feel so confident in.
Yeah, I would agree with that perspective. I remember through my life, it's like I don't try to judge people off their moral character. I don't judge their character. You know, I judge actions, which are observable and easy to judge.
Yeah.
The action was either right or wrong in the sense of morality or in the sense of, you know, correctness or logical reasoning. It was either right or wrong. But as far as they embody who they are, I don't even ask people that question, like, do I think this person is a horrible person or not? No. My views have changed over the years, too. Obviously, I used to write people off in action. That was it, you know, throw them away. But that's kind of evolved over the years. And now it's like there's more to this person than what action they're presenting now. They're going through a life journey of this experience, or they have this experience, and things change, and you'll see that this person may have an exposure to this. So maybe you're right, because I'm not confident in the fact of that value-based judgment, but I also don't want someone like an ISFP telling me, do this, or do that, or this person's horrible, and I don't want that either.
No. Yeah. The whole point of Gammas and their use of extrovert sensation is that they want to use force to the point where no one can be the boss of them. So it's not going to be a relationship where the ISFP is telling the ENTJ what to do in a directorial fashion. It's more that this person is someone you feel very close with, you can trust their judgment, and you would voluntarily assess a situation in light of the advice that they're giving. It's not something, if it were to breach their feeling of independence, which is very important to ENTJs and ESFPs, and their feeling of no one being the boss of them, then it would not work. That more controlling aspect of extrovert sensation is something you may likely see in more beta relationships, where it's not about your relation towards the other person and the respect between the people as equals, and it can go more in terms of hierarchy and orders and commands. I'd say that's more of a beta sort of thing you may find happening.
Last question, then we're going to toss it right over to Bjorn again. The question is, what are the values of Delta, and how does that apply to the INFP type?
Right. So with Delta, it's a mixture of, first of all, sort of good faith judgment, the idea of seeing people through multiple perspectives, getting to know people who have some sort of inner potential, trying to find out their different ways of viewing the world. The idea of there being no real set truth, so much as different people's perspectives. At the same time, this need for self-sufficiency, being able to handle things yourself, self-improvement. Yeah, I think that Brianna touched exactly on what the difference between Delta and something like Beta is, when you said that it's more of an internal struggle, an internal desire for improvement and being the best of oneself, as opposed to the more beta approach of it's more external, changing the world, having an impact on one's environment, often imposing one's idea of what is true onto the reality. So for Delta, it's very much about the idea of personal potential, good faith judgment, giving someone a chance to explore their personality more, explore who they are as a person, and this idea of being able to manage things for oneself and to improve as a human being through learning, through taking in anything that the world has to offer.
Okay, Brianna, does that resonate with you?
Yeah, it does. I think he did a pretty good job of describing it, and I think this sounds accurate.
Okay. Next question for you is, this was asked by an audience, but what is the most important thing in the world to you?
The most important thing.
Yes.
Is it that Disney calendar behind you?
Maybe. I would say it was having freedom to pursue what's personally important to me, whatever that may be, like personal goals or like creative pursuits. I think that's what's most important to me.
Okay. Do you find that your value placed on things that are important, whether it's a goal or a thing, change with time, or are they pretty stagnant?
It depends. Some things, like I think INFPs go through like obsessions with things, like they discover something new and they like become really focused on it and they spend a lot of time on it, and then as time goes on they might lose interest and find something else that they want to spend time on. But some things keep them interested, and I think it just depends on what the thing is. Like some things like MBTI has kept my interest for like several years, and I think like
I hate when that happens.
creative pursuits that kept my interest, but some other things I may have been interested in for a time and then just like moved on from.
Okay. Perfect. So Daniel, I guess Daniel just hopped off. So Jack,
I'm here.
hey, would
I'm
you?
here.
Yeah. So Daniel, you have any questions for her? And Blake, welcome.
Blake, the ESTJ is here.
All right. So we were talking about you earlier, Blake. Well, not you,
Yeah.
but the type you represent. So
I was missing you, Blake.
Talking about my type?
hey, Blake, do you have a Snuggie on, or am I seeing things? Oh no, I'm seeing things.
No, this polo.
I was like, Blake, you changed from the suit.
Your
Yeah,
name's-
my suit got abducted.
Blake, your name tag is backwards.
Yeah, you forgot to take in the fact that your camera flips. But notice how he prepared for it. Notice how he prepared. That was a classic moment. Okay,
I didn't know if it would flip or not. But anyways, yeah, INFP, Natalie kind of filled me in. INFP and ESTJ. What about it?
Oh, we were just talking about that.
What about my childhood nightmares? I mean, experiences?
Well, see, that's what I'm talking about. That's exactly what we're talking about, how the INFP ESTJ relationship, as far as ESTJ and myers-briggs, sounds like a nightmare. And yeah, so but as far as socionics go, it's the ideal relationship. So Jack here, who's a socionist, was explaining that the ESTJ and he was explaining that the ESTJ and MBTI is very different than the ESTJ and socionics. And so it was a very
I want to hear about this ESTJ. He sounds like a cool guy.
Well, the live stream has it earlier. We're not going to have Jack repeat himself, so it's on there. So when we post the video, you can go back and look at it.
I think just watch Captain America films and look at Brock on Pokemon. That'll give you all you need to know.
I love those. I love Brock.
Brock is pretty cool.
Yeah. So all right. So Blake, I know you just hopped on, but obviously we have Brianna here. She's on INFP. So And so I didn't know if you had any questions for INFPs while you're here, Blake. So you just popped in. So I don't know if you've said, you know what, I don't think about INFPs, or some questions you might have about INFPs, but she's here at the disposal of questioning.
Okay, is an INFP Enneagram Type 3 exist?
Is it possible?
Is it possible?
It's
even possible?
probably possible,
sorry, what?
but I'm sure it's probably possible, but I would say it's very uncommon.
And they're probably crazy, right?
Well, that's up for debate.
Right. I don't know. I mean, I know INFP is the most compatible type according to Socionics, but I really resonate with other people who have the same drive and ambition that I do. I'm just saying. And even if somebody can fill the holes that I have in my life, or like help me with my weaknesses, you know, they're a great partner, all that, I still want them to be ambitious and supportive as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I know like a lot of thinking doms do prefer someone to have like the same drive as them. So some of them might even choose like their own type, like another ESTJ, which I think will be like a power struggle. I mean, it probably could work,
Yeah.
but
I don't like the idea
like
of that.
I
hate the idea of that.
I actually met an ESTJ couple a month ago, and it does not work.
Okay, but we can't judge all of them off of one relationship, Daniel.
No. Like, no. Listen, it not that relationship, but the dynamic that builds up over time in a healthy or not healthy way.
Are you saying that all relationships build up over time based on this one relationship?
No. It's just this relationship that I met.
What do these people do to get such a profound opportunity to influence intertype relations?
They were both flip flops of 8, 3, and 3, 8 in their tri type. So both had like a tendency to be like too like assertive and controlling over the other, and nobody was emotionally present. So it just exploded.
Without emotions, it just can't work.
Yeah, you need that polarity between somebody who's being emotionally vulnerable and somebody, like who's, the one leading the ship.
Okay, so I don't agree with me personally, I'm not going to say for all people who are ENTJ. For me personally, I wouldn't want another ENTJ. They're just the description. Now, granted, people can grow and they can have other aspects and they can tap in other aspects of their character and mold and change. But as far as reading the description, that is like the least attractive thing I could possibly read. And so when I read it, I'm like, oh. Like,
yeah, but that's your own type. Like, are you saying? Yeah.
I am. I wouldn't date me. I mean, I would date me if I were not me, but I mean, I wouldn't date me in general. Like, I wouldn't want to date another me, being me. Yeah, so no, I mean, I look at it, if I'm looking at it in the sense of, dating application, let me fill this out. And I come out with me, I would be really disappointed. So that's the idea. I would want the opposite. I would want something that is, a cultivation, not a, hey, I'm a clone. I mean, I might as well clone myself in that case.
Need the yin to your yang.
Yeah,
well,
exactly. I want the cultivation. So anyway, off topic, but go ahead, Brianna.
That's kind of what I think about, like the same type relationships. Like with INFP, I have seen like several people who have done that and are happy, but other types it hasn't worked out. And I think I'm not sure I want another INFP because like you are a lot alike, but you also have the same weaknesses and it doesn't really help you grow. And you kind of like just become like stagnant. They don't have any functions that can help you, grow in your life. It's just kind of feeding off each other and it could end up like unhealthy.
That's a really good point, Jack. This is a really good opportunity because I'm going to ask you this question and follow up to that. The question here is, The one thing that I never liked about Socionics, as far as I could read, like I don't write off the whole system because I can't find information. That would be ridiculous. But I have not been able to find out information on type development in Socionics. Okay, so actually how to become a better version of your type. Because the one thing that I'm noticing in Socionics is like, hey, you suck at, for example, I suck at SI. I guess I'm going to always suck at SI according to the Socionics model. There's nothing I can really do about it. So the question is that I need to, A, if there is in Socionics, where the hell is it? And then B, how does type development work in Socionics?
I mean, my position would be that development can happen within Socionics. It's a question of moving beyond the set structure and going more towards dynamics and how you actually adjust to the day-to-day as a person. For instance, myself as an intuitive, logical energizer in ENTP, I'd say that I've certainly gone through developments simply by understanding or taking in more and more situations by which I understand how to apply my weaker information elements more effectively. Now, sure, there are limits to this. I'd be very surprised to hear of an ENTP actually managing to use introverted sensation to the degree in which they're using their stronger functions like extrovert intuition and introverted logic. But it is reasonable to suggest that in their mobilizing function, also known as a tertiary in MBTI, that they were able to have practiced and used it in enough situations to have the appearance of competence. There's this whole idea come up with this guy called Bukalov came with this idea of grading their different functions according to dimensions. Now, the most basic dimension would be experience, simply experiencing a function being used. Further up would be what's known as norms, normativity, a sense of how this should appropriately be used in situations you're used to. Now, in that regard, you could say that you can get better at using certain information element if it's in what's known as a 2D function, where it has experience and normativity with it. You just have to experience enough norms to learn from. Now, going a bit further up, situation, being able to apply it well in any sort of situation, well, that's a strong function and you're good at it. So it's being able to learn enough norms so that you can span different situations with those norms. But what it does mean is that the thing that a type can't really break away from is being able to apply that same information element in a completely new situation where they haven't experienced before. But that's what learning's about, isn't it?
Right. So there's these MBTI people out here who are like, I'm going to master all 8 functions.
Yeah.
And they sit floating above a concrete slate of rock in their meditative pose, and they're attempting to master all 8 functions. The question, I can't even take the question seriously, but I want to ask anyway. The question I have is, number one, is in MBTI, it's kind of like ignore your shadow in a sense and just embrace who you are and develop that aspect. There's also other competing theories too, like, hey, develop these other ones. I like the approach that you kind of mentioned, which was, learn where they are in position, understand that that's how they play a role in you, and develop them within their role and context.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Daniel, are you going to say that you've mastered all 8?
No, I've not yet.
See, those people.
No. But I kind of saw when I read up on shadow functions and just my growing knowledge of them, I guess I did read it somewhere where, your shadow functions or the functions that you don't use or aren't as present in your life, right? Whether you're thinking about them or not, or you're able to acknowledge them, right? I think they come off more as specialist functions where like you use them in, like how you were saying, Damon, like if you need to use FE, if you need to express and put on a hat, you can, right? But it's for a very desired role for that kind of situation. So I kind of see shadow functions as a way to, acknowledge the ways in which you can use certain functions and then slowly branch out with them. And I guess pretty much what Jack was saying, I totally agree with what Jack was saying. Really, it's more about putting in place the norms, discovering how you would, or where you are currently with how you use those functions, and just kind of branching out from there.
Okay.
Right. Like for example, like, you know, I'm not going to use SI the same way you would, or Jack would, or Blake would. So it's about understanding how we're currently using those systems, and then, you know.
Well, if you're reading an FP, you would. But me, it's.
Yeah. So let's bounce over to Brianna real quick, and let's ask her this question. How have your shadow function played a role in your life? How have you noticed them coming to fruition? And then I would like Jack's feedback on saying that's actually the combination of this type dynamics to see if it's actually shadow functions playing a role or if it's just the type dynamic in itself. So because Jack pairs the functions and they work differently according to the dynamic and the energy transfer of functions. And I want to see the correlation between that. So Brianna, what have you suspected to be an operating shadow function in your personality? Maybe in a moment that wasn't so great or a moment that was, and then see if we can tie that back to a model that actually makes sense.
Well, I actually
Man.
have no they have used my shadow NI or introverted intuition.
And what was that? What did you, I'm sorry, the audio cut out. Could you repeat that?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
I was saying I have had instances where I might think I've used my shadow NI or introverted intuition, and I've noticed it when I kind of had like feeling, I didn't really know what it was, but I kind of felt it building up, and then the thing would happen. And I'm like, why didn't I see that coming? Even though I kind of felt something that was going to happen, but I didn't realize it until like the moment after. And then like everything clicked into place. So I don't know if that is shadow NI or not.
Okay, so I think the corresponding element is that INFPs actually have a decent use of NI. It's just not as valued,
Yes.
as far as I understand.
Yeah.
So
is their strongest information element, as well as their leading information element,
okay, so their strongest information element.
as well as their leading. So the leading is introverted ethics. Their other that one's very strong, and then their introverted intuition is also very strong. They're the two strongest.
Okay, but it's not as valued. Is that correct?
Exactly.
All right, so yeah, so that could have been that. I mean, as far as I understand, that sounds like that NI coming out. What do you think, Jack?
Well, I say, in general, you can see that Brienne's a rather reflective person, prone to going into head and thinking, and going into imaginative wanderings. Someone who spends a lot of time in their head thinking about where things are going for the long run, how things have happened before, leading through to now. That's all introverted intuition. So, of course, you'll find that anyone who's introverted intuitive, they will be a lot more reflective than, say, someone who's more extroverted sensation using, or someone who's just extroverted and sensory. The tendency to reflect, just as a background tendency of them to do, even if they don't place a heavy valuing on actually committing to sort of long-term paths, committing to outcomes and limiting the possibilities, that they just happen to be very reflective, that is a background use of the information elements. That would fit demonstrative introverted intuition.
Perfect. All right, Blake, I'm gonna hand it over to you real quick. You got anything?
No, not anything to bounce off that. Sorry.
Okay, I just make sure everybody gets an opportunity. Daniel, you have anything?
Yeah, actually, I have seen a lot of INFPs. When I'm around them, I make a lot of INFP friends. They're great people. Inside joke. I see a lot of INFPs use introvert intuition, not necessarily like in their mind, but like it's like the agenda at the end of the road. Like within all their observations and understandings of people, they eventually want to get to like a conclusion to feel safe with people, I guess. I don't know if that's true or not. But I can see that with like their curiosity. As I've dated many INFPs, there's always like the same similarity of curiosity, being curious, and then all these different observations adding up to an overall kind of decision or ultimate kind of perspective of somebody, and then from there, like almost like introvert intuition is like points of like checkpoints maybe, where like at the end of the day, introvert intuition for an INFP or other similar types that don't really have introvert intuition in their stack use NI as a means, as a checkpoint to further navigate life situations maybe.
So yeah, I got another follow-up question to this, Brianna. Audience member asked this question is, how do you value SI in a relationship?
Okay, first off, what is SI? That's like one of the most misunderstood functions.
Yes.
Oh, well, this goes into a whole nother topic. Let's just see how she values SI in a relationship. And then because the Socionics SI is totally different than the MBTI SI. So Blake, don't scream.
I was just getting it now.
Yeah, we'll talk about it later. I got Jack on another line. Daniel got off the phone with an INFP just a few minutes ago. And then, so Brianna, how do you value SI?
We're talking about the MBTI SI?
Yes, MBTI SI in a relationship.
Do you mean like how I value someone else's?
Yeah, sure.
Comes out.
Yeah, sure. I don't know the exact scope of the question, but we're going to use that.
Okay. As I think it helps me feel more safe, and like I feel like more like a stability. I know if I use it in a relationship, it's more about, I think how I use SI is matching up people's like actions with their words. That's something I do a lot. And when I'm talking to someone and developing like a connection with them, I'm constantly like evaluating if what they're saying and doing like matches up.
Okay. And and that's a pretty valued function for you, obviously. I'm going to have Jack just take the opportunity to explain briefly.
They go off.
Do what? Yeah, you're actually kind of cutting out, so I might have cut you off by accident. So I apologize for that. If you're finished, I can't really hear you right now, so I don't know if you finished or not. Could you?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you finish?
Yeah, I think so.
Because I think we might have missed the last portion of what you said.
I was just saying that I use my SI to evaluate people's words and actions, right. And if they don't, then kind of like an alarm goes off.
Okay. Perfect. Jack, would you actually briefly, within 30 seconds, define the Socionics SI?
Okay, introvert sensation, or the Socionics version of SI, is about sort of flow or harmony in the moment. The opposite extrovert sensation, more about conflict of wills in the moment. It's all about the sort of flow. Now, with Delta specifically, NFPs, SI plus TE, more about self-sufficiency, things being convenient, easygoing, doing a good job of good quality. SI plus FE, more about good feelings, positive emotions.
Okay, perfect. So Brianna, how does that correlate with you? How do you feel about that particular description?
Could you repeat that, please?
Okay, so introvert sensation in Socionics is about sort of the harmony and flow in the moment. Things working organically, naturally. Accepting how things happen, basically. Adapting to it.
That's an interesting perception. It seems like it would have a more like positive aspect than how I use SI, because mine is more like negative aspects, with like going over negative things that happened in the past and like bringing them up. Whereas if in Socionics, it's more about
present.
Just like
Brianna, we lost you
It
again,
would
so you
be-
might have to repeat that last sentence.
I said if how much did you hear? Sorry.
Just the last sentence or two I think we missed.
Okay. I think if Socionics SI is more about going with the flow and taking things as they come in the moment, that seems like it would be a more positive thing than how I use my SI as.
Okay, I think we got it. So that'd be, if I you correct me if I misunderstood you, but you use your SI in the sense of a more negative aspect, or what you connotate as negative. I see it as more of a filtering process, and then you see the Socionics definition as a descriptor for something more positive. Do you see this positive aspect in your personality? And then the follow-up question for Jack is this how SI plays a role in the INFP? So go ahead, Brianna, then I'll flip it over to Jack.
I'm sorry, what was the last question?
The question was, do you see the positive aspect of what you labeled as positive, the more harmonious, go with the flow aspect in your own personality?
Yes, I do see some of it. I think it's hard for me to get out of my head sometimes, but when I do, I can be that way, and I think that is in a more positive state of mind.
Okay. So Jack, how does the SI typically play a role in the INFP?
Yes, I think I may have strayed a bit by describing more my experience of introverted sensations being more positive, feel-good, extroverted feeling, blocking. When it comes to deltas, like NFPs and STJs, it isn't really so much about positive, feel-good harmony. It's far more about sort of the absence of interruption to someone, handling things with their own resources, doing good quality work, doing a good job. It's more minimalist in a way. It's getting rid of any sort of interruptions to the flow in that moment, and also a sense of detail. I didn't mention before, a sense of the details of quality that come into it. So in a way, you can imagine an INFP is someone who aspires to essentially have certain things in their life in balance, in order. Well, not necessarily in order in the sense of a very clear structure and too rigid, but rather things like safety and security in the environment, things being made. It's the way they treat their home and their house, the way that things that contribute to sort of the feng shui, as you were, of their environment is something that's quite important to them, something they can take quite a lot of pride in. Now, what Brianna mentioned about thinking about the past, that is very much sort of the MBTI idea of sort of tradition, the idea of comparing our past experiences with present experiences. With Socionics, that actually fit more into introverted intuition, the idea that it's something that isn't present. But yeah, definitely that the sort of introverted sensation aspects, the idea of a sort of the flow of things in that immediate moment in a more minimalistic way, more of a self-sufficiency and convenience and good job sort of way. Yeah, that's how I'd say the INFP. They tend to take more pride in their aspiration.
Perfect. Okay, so I don't know if Daniel's here. I want to give him an opportunity if he is here. If he's not, then we'll pass. But Daniel, whenever you come back, if you have an opportunity, go ahead and pitch in if you would like to pitch in.
Yeah, I was going to say, Brianna, do you have any questions for any of us? Since this is always 80% of the time directed towards you.
I do have a question for Jack. I heard your story of like how you got into Socionics, and are you like BTI, and like are you like as familiar with both?
Yeah, I started with MBTI when I was around. I was first introduced to it when I was 15, so that's around 10 years ago. And I sort of really got into it when I was like 17. I basically had to give everyone the human metrics personality test at school. And I got onto online forums. I was on Personality Cafe for a while. Got kicked out of that for being a bit of a nutter. Went to Personality Nation, which doesn't exist anymore. And I met this one guy who used to come on and talk about socionics. Now, I sort of learned socionics in the process of sort of debating and arguing with him. And yeah, in other words, to win an argument over what socionics type Greg House was, I essentially learned the beginnings of socionics. After that, I hooked up with one person called Olga, and we were running meetups in London, and I met this guy called Peter, who I think has been a very strong influence in terms of learning the more fine applications of socionics. He's got like decades of experience. So yeah, that's my journey into socionics, learning from one guy in the forum, and yeah, just going into it from there. In general, I found that it has solved a lot of irregularities I've encountered with MBTI. A lot of the definitions seem to be like parts seem to be forced. I don't understand the rationale behind why something's been put together. Like one question I'm going to ask this Tom fellow later I was arguing with, I'm asking, what is it exactly that makes feeling different from thinking? Why is it different, and what makes it different? And I'll be interested to find out if we can come up with a strong rationale behind that. That's the sort of thing that socionics does very well with using all these sorts of dichotomies. Everything is dichotomies with socionics.
So, do you still believe in MBTI, or do you use like Socionics and MBTI like to kind of make a bigger picture like together?
I've sort of floated between different viewpoints on this. Initially, I was sort of stepping out of MBTI into Socionics, and so I want to investigate the differences between the two separate systems. So I went around my university, UCL, hung around in nightclubs with a laptop with both a Socionics personality test and an MBTI personality test, trying to collect all the data to see how people varied and discover the unique and interesting combinations of the two different personality systems. My position has evolved in that I'm more likely to see Socionics as like the MBTI plus. It's not that Socionics was designed to be the MBTI plus. I don't think the creator had MBTI in mind when she was creating her model. But I find it difficult to find something in MBTI, and I've looked, which contributes to an understanding of psychological type in a Jungian sense that Socionics does not already contribute and build on and make more clear. In that regard, I'd say that the most natural thing to happen would be for MBTI people to shift into Socionics through learning the greater complexity of it, because that's very difficult, because it's a lot more not there aren't very many sources, all the rest.
Okay.
Perfect. Okay, Brianna, any other questions for the rest of us as we wind down this call?
I think this is a bit of a change of subject, but I had a question for you and Blake, if he's still here.
Yeah, I'm here. Hi.
Okay. I'll let Blake answer it, unless you want my particular viewpoint. But...
Well, I kind of want both.
Okay, perfect.
I've heard it said before that thinking that loyalty is very important to them, and I have seen like that personally, and I was just wondering like, what is your idea of loyalty, and is that really important to you?
Blake.
Okay, yeah, my idea of loyalty is being like loyal to yourself. Like if I'm associated with you and I know what your value system is and you stray away from that, then I'm not gonna like respect you as much after that.
Okay, but is it important? Is that important?
Like, do you mean loyalty like in relationships or friendships? Like dating?
Well, like either, like maybe like in friendships, like if someone like betrays you or something, like is loyalty really important to you or not so much?
No, it really is. I've been like betrayed a lot of times throughout my teenage years. They're just people that totally disregard having each other's back. Like I remember one time I was moving from my house to a new apartment, and then none of my friends would want to come help me because they were too busy off partying. something like that. And I just thought that was absolutely disgusting, that you wouldn't go out of your way to help your friend out. It's just sickening. Don't get me started on it.
Okay, so go ahead. I'm sorry, you cut out, Brown.
It grinds my gears.
Where you would like cut off that person if they like betrayed you, or would you still like accept them?
I've cut them off. Yeah.
Would you cut somebody off? Would you cut somebody off because they didn't help you move? Would you cut somebody off because they didn't help you move?
Yeah, that small act of like not wanting to help me, it just breaks a contract that we have. It really does.
Okay, remind me to help you to move.
Please. Or I'll like openly, you know, ask them, hey, why don't you come help me out in front of like other peers so that, you know, their betrayal is publicized. Something like that. I don't know if that's unhealthy. I don't do that anymore, but I just remembered from that's what I did do. I
had something to chime in about that. I actually helped an ESTJ move recently, and what was really funny is that he had a friend so he had to move a whole bunch of stuff with his truck, and so I just wanted to help. Apparently he was moving stuff like the last 2 days, and I'm like, dude, why don't you let me know that you're moving? I'll totally help you. And he's like, what, really? I'm like, yeah. So I go over, and one of his better friends that he's been friends with since like he's been a kid was supposed to come with his truck and help him move stuff over. And, you know, I was like, hey, where's your friend? He's just like, I have no idea. And like I can sense that he was getting angry. And the friend finally shows up, and he doesn't do any work, really. Like, doesn't do anything to help him move, just kind of sits there and like chills. And so I was watching my ESTJ friend get really pissed off, and it actually took longer to move than it expected because of this guy. So it was really weird to see what Blake's describing in real time. Like, they started arguing and stuff, and like, I don't know, like, it's just that I recognize like the loyalty I have with it's very evident. It's very evident. And so I always appreciate that about my friendship with this particular ESTJ. I really appreciate the fact that, you know, he values our loyalty, like our bond between friends. And so, you know, that's how I kind of reciprocate in our friendship. If he needs something, I'm always there, right? And so, you know, when that happened, I was like, dude, that was really uncool of your friend to do that. He's just like, yeah, I don't want to talk about it. Like, he was really mad. And I don't know. It's just something that, like, when ESTJs give something, I think, you know, and similarly, ENTJs do it in a different way. But, you know, from my experience, I've seen both parties do that with loyalty. So.
All right. So my contribution to this is loyalty is my single most important value. There's nothing even close in my book of values than as far as loyalty. That's the one that's levels higher than anything else. And the way that I see loyalty and that I gauge it or metricize it or whatever it may be is not on acts committed. It's not on contributions given to the relationship. It's not metricized performance. It's not put on an Excel spreadsheet. It's evaluated in a way to where it's specifically focused on the unwritten contract or the unwritten laws between two individuals. And that can vary based on the individual. This is especially important in when the relationship becomes an exclusive thing. For an example, in relationships or romantic relationships or intimate relationships, when the relationship is on an exclusivity, there is an unwritten law that unwritten law should not be broken. Commitment is number one in my book. If you commit something, you give your word to something, you say you're going to do something, you need to follow through. And of course, there's the passerby type of, hey, yeah, I'll be there later. I'll show up to that party. That's one thing. But if it's between two friends and they count on you for something and you flip it, then that's it. That's like you've pushed that limit. Now, one thing I don't do is I don't write people off. I compartmentalize. Whether this is healthy or not, I haven't even taken time to assess this. So if someone violates loyalty, I know to move them out of an inner circle into an outer circle. And the further they do this, I will keep moving them further and further out into the valence level, where you can't get any further out. You're on the valence level, so there's no other explanation for that. You're so far out that I don't eject you from my life, and I'll still help you, because your actions don't influence me as a character, which means that if you're in need, I will still help you, but I don't expect anything from you, nor will I contribute to you in the sense of my knowledge, my life, or will I put any faith or trust into you. Now, this being said, what is this this unwritten law or unwritten contract between two people? It's based on that individual relationship, the scope of that relationship, and it's based on the merit between the two individuals, and especially where it comes to a sense of shared values. And so whatever those shared values may be. So for example, my relationship with a very close friend of mine is what friends do for each other. And it's very, very hard. And it's to the point where we in a sense, I've labeled it like a brotherhood. And we know the rules, we know the laws that, and I expect there to be a 100% trust element there. It's about trust. You don't have to tell me everything. That's not what it is. I don't need to know all those details. But there's things that are personal that you don't share with people. I get that. But it's a trust thing. If you think that I am not going to respond to something in a way that is convenient for you, the two things that should happen in this type of relationship, as far as this is concerned, is number one is, why wouldn't I respond? Think of this. Why wouldn't I respond? Okay, why wouldn't I respond in the manner in which you expect me to respond? Because you're doing something that is invalid, or something that is false, or something that is not good for you. Or B, that you don't believe I trust you, or you don't trust me. And so if you're getting a negative response and anticipating a negative response, somebody who has loyalty goes, I'm going to tell you something, and you probably are not going to like it, but this is the way it is. And this is the way that I'm feeling about this situation. Don't throw me under the bus. Don't backstab. Don't go behind me and do something. If you have a problem with the way that I commit or do something, you need to tell me. This is not a, A, B, and C conversation, be in the middle. I'm going to negotiate between two people. It is, I'm going to speak to you face to face, because that's the value I hold in you as a friend. I expect you to follow through. I expect you to do those things, because that is what is committed in a friendship. So expectation, not that I expect you to be a perfect person, but I anticipate that as a friend that you would be there. I anticipate these things. Now, people make mistakes, and they may have not understood this contract in full. So this is where attention is called to the matter. If it's an honest mistake, that's one thing. People make mistakes. But if it was a blatant cross of loyalty, which it has to be evaluated at an individual level, then that's where the energy boost in moving to an upper level goes to, and you're moving to more of an outer level. And so I see Blake getting a little antsy. I wonder if he has anything to contribute to this concept.
But I was just thinking more in depth, like it's not just, we're friends and it's like a one-time deal, and they don't want to do it. Like they betray me somehow. Like I give people chances.
Mm-hmm.
As a matter of fact, an ENFP friend of mine, who I lived with and kept around, I gave him so many chances, and he would always disappoint me. And I have limits. I have limits now for how many chances I can give people. Because you can only, that there's too many people in the world that are willing to help you and willing to actually like care for you and give you positivity, to waste your time with people who are going to do the opposite of that.
Right. And that's the concept of moving someone out. What I mean by that, I don't cut people off. It's like I don't blatantly just ignore somebody and go, I'm just not gonna do that. Now, over text message, I ignore everyone. My bad. But as far as like when it comes to someone who's actually in need, regardless of your relationship with me or not, I'm gonna do what I can to help you. And that's my character. You don't influence my character. You don't change my perception. But if you're also putting yourself in a position to where you're recreating the problem, I'm not going to help you. And if you move yourself on the outer circle, you're more likely to be categorized or compartmentalized into a category that you're unable to help yourself consistently. So I'm going to tell you, I'm going to solve this problem for you one time, and that's it. So I have cut people off in the past. I don't do so anymore, because I recognize that people are on their own life journey. I don't let them, the people who are on this outer level, they can't influence me. They can't change my opinion. They can't alter anything, my perspective. They don't negatively draw me down. They don't bring me up. They're just out there. And that's that compartmentalized.
So,
go ahead. I don't know if you cut out, Brianna, but.
Don't feel anything. They don't like anyway. You were saying?
I missed about 80% of that. Could you repeat the question, please? Oh man, she's cutting out pretty bad.
Yeah, so like you kind of just like, can you hear me?
No,
Yeah, you're right now.
You have to repeat it one more time. I shut your camera off, so go ahead and try it again.
All right, so I was just saying, it sounds like what you were saying is you just cut off connection, like all connection to that person, and you just don't feel anything, and I can't.
Oh, that's frustrating. I don't know what she's asking.
I'm sort of getting the gist of what she's saying, in that the idea of cutting someone off and not really looking back and not really feeling that sort of the sense of a window closing on someone, that I'm guessing what she's saying is that they may have grated with her a position which is more about good faith judgment, giving people a chance, maybe even there might even be exploited to a degree in how much they may give someone a chance if they think there's some sort of potential there in the person, but eventually come to a decision that they can't maintain that level of relationship and without being damaged.
Okay, so if that's the question she's asking, my perspective on that is I wouldn't say I cut off connection because they can still communicate. But as far as I may not respond depending on the topic of the communication. But if she's talking about connection in the sense of like emotional connection, like if I care for somebody, I care for somebody. I don't care how bad of a person you are. Now, how I demonstrate that, or the ability for you to influence that, is the differentiation point. In the sense of, I may care for you, but I'm not going to allow you to affect me. So I still have the feelings. The feeling doesn't change. I mean, like I said, I tend to see beyond what is at the surface. If you're presenting a certain aspect of your character to me, your character is not your true essence. And there are legitimately people out there who I would entirely question their character in full. And I consider them toxic people, to the point where they will affect you negatively. That being said, I want to make sure that I recognize that character is at that time, and I'm just going to move them out of that level. Does that mean they're always going to be that way? No, because if I really set up a precedent and go, I'm going to push everyone away that makes mistakes that are cross my values, A, I put myself in the position that I am better than everybody, which I don't believe. And then B, I put myself in this position of I'm a hypocrite because I have done everything that I wish I hadn't done. I've been there. I've done the mistakes. I've made those mistakes. I've been through those making that issue of, hey, I have a history of mistakes that I've done that I would have written myself off of. Like, these things would have caused me to write me off, but I've done them. My background, the things I've learned, the things I've experienced about myself, and I've moved past them. So do I think that I should permanently write somebody off where I never respond to them again and never talk to them again? No. I leave always a small gap of just a possibility that maybe you have changed. Now, I'm not a fool for it. I'm not gonna be like, oh yeah, I trust you fully again. No, you have to earn it. You have to earn it. You may feel like you're always gonna have to catch up. That may be the case. And you put yourself there, you pull yourself out. It's a very self-efficacy thing. If you chose that path, you're gonna have to work yourself out. And what you may find out is a friendship with me may not be worth it for you. And so you move on to somebody who you can start over with in full. But it's very unlikely to get pushed all the way out and then come right back into the inner circle. That's just not going to happen. I've never seen it happen in my book, and I just don't see it happening. But there's always the potential that I have in the back of my mind. Somebody will always have a chance, but the chance is limited, and it's very, very hard. So in a sense, I do kind of cut them off, but not really, because like I said, I'd be there for them ultimately if they were challenged with something. They're human beings. And regardless of what they've done. Now, if they're trying to kill me, that's one thing. They're human beings, and it's not really my value system to leave someone to suffer, as long as they didn't put themselves there. That's the perspective. So that's an individual basis of it. Hopefully, that answers your question.
Yes, it does.
Okay. Any last questions? We definitely should be winding this up soon. Daniel, any questions for Brianna? Brianna, any questions for us? Feel free. Anybody speak up real quick before we call it a good evening for us here.
Oh, just about the last 10 minutes, just completely not what I do at all. And it's all very alien to me, this whole chance giving thing. It's very, it's a bit disturbing, but it's okay. It's all right. You guys are great. It's fine.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'd love to hear your perspective. That's probably for another show. But ultimately, Daniel, anything?
No, I really like this call, and to end note, I really liked what you and Blake said about loyalty. I'd say I learned a lot through one of my best friends being an INFJ, ENTJ being you, and a lot of ESTJs in my life. I learned a lot from those types generally about loyalty, and what that means and what that could mean for me. And a lot of what you said, Damon, I resonate with. It's kind of how I adopted my own way over time. And I understand Blake's perspective too, because I see it, on a day-to-day basis with my friends who are ESTJs who are not Blake. And so, yeah, I really appreciate this call. Like, we had a huge spectrum of type here, and I hope everybody liked this video.
Well, I was pretty much agreeing with Blake. I just made a joke out of the moving thing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'm on the same page. It's just, I've narrowed it down to loyalty being my most important value, though.
Yeah,
but that includes the word of commitment. But anyway,
true.
So Blake, anything?
No, not really. Thanks, guys, for coming on. I know I've been bugging INFP.
Yeah.
Sorry, I forgot your name.
My name is Brianna.
Brianna, I'm sorry.
Yes.
But I'm really glad we got you on the live stream. I feel like some people got some valuable knowledge from it.
Knowledge.
Yeah, I hope so too.
3 things.
3 things. Knowledge.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and we appreciate you guys taking the time to be here on the show. And the audience, thank you very much for spending your time in this little extra long live stream, but it got a little interesting toward the end according to values. And like I said, I am prone to ranting. I apologize if someone felt like I put on my preacher suit and threw my arms up in the air or whatever. But so that being said, thank you so much, and have a good night for those in the U.S.